Hi, it's Jackson. I'm a college student with a passion for game development who's been ignoring their classwork for a week to make a cool game. After working on multiple projects in Unity, I finally stumbled upon an idea that I'm truly passionate about, but for this game, I will be using Godot. Emerald Isle will be a game that takes place in a small coastal town on the east coast of the United States. After being shipwrecked by Hurricane Hazel, you awake in the town of Emerald Isle, a seemingly normal small town ravaged by the hurricane. You must help rebuild the town, but things are more mystical than first meets the eye. The player will be able to challenge bosses that threaten their new home, build relationships with a fun and diverse cast of characters, gather resources to build, and become a great fisherman. The world works in mysterious ways, and the Game Jam Fish Fest was just about to start. While my planned game will be much more than a fishing game, it lays out the groundwork for one of the main mechanics. In this video, I will go over my process for developing and implementing fishing in a fun and unique way, all in a new game engine. I was not a fan of the way I implemented fishing in my last video. That video received a lot of valid criticism, all of which I will use to help improve the game. In this video, I will be creating a more realistic approach to fishing, while figuring out a way for it to still feel rewarding to the player. In order to do this, I will be using a minimal UI, so the start of fishing minigame that I just created will have to go. At least I learned some cool stuff about Godot. Reloading the game to test things was super fast, which was really nice. Progress bars are really easy to use. When I started this, I had no experience with Godot or Python. I always considered Python to be what I called a baby language, and while Godot's scripting language isn't Python, it's pretty similar. I guess you're gonna have to call me a baby because I am officially a Godot fan. I got started with the development of the game on day 1. The first step in fishing is to cast. I want to give the players a lot of freedom during this step, so I decided to allow the player to cast in any direction and distance. The goal is to get this fish to land on the cursor. The plan is to use physics equations to create an arc effect. There's hundreds of physics equations to pick from. I just need to find the right one. The known values are the starting position and the ending position. We can also create a gravity constant as another variable. This function right here will let me solve for the initial velocity, and the one right below it will let me find a launch angle. So this is what it looks like in code. We find the velocity and angle of launch, and use that information to find the length of the throw. The time helps us know when the cast is over. I also split up left and right. The projectile function was acting weird when launching in the negative direction, so I just set a variable for the direction, and then do the calculations in the positive direction. Once you have the initial launch conditions, it is easy to create a trajectory. I found a physics classroom video made by this amazing old guy that explains how to find the x and y displacement of a projectile, which is exactly what I need to do. X displacement is the velocity multiplied by the time, and then multiplied by the cosine of the angle. The y displacement is a little different because of gravity. It's the velocity times the time, and then multiplied by the sine of the initial angle. Then the effect of gravity is added to the projectile with -1/2 gravity times time squared. The x displacement is multiplied by the direction we set earlier. I'm not sure why, but for some reason our little fish friend is landing vertically opposite of the target. I know how to fix the issue, but I would really like to find out why this is happening. I multiplied the initial target y by -1 to get the projectile to land in the correct spot. After some research into this issue, I finally figured out the problem. In Godot, going upwards is negative, while going down is positive. This was messing up my physics equations, so all I had to do was invert the y values. It works! Clicking on a spot launches the fish in an arc to the cursor. Well, it's 2 AM now, and I have class in the morning, so I think I'm gonna have to call it a day. On day 2, I started by changing Fred the fish to a fishing rod and bobber so that it actually makes sense. I made a fishing manager that handles the current state of fishing and set it to be an auto-load class. This Godot feature makes the class work as a singleton that runs from the start, regardless of the current scene. I then started working on the visuals of the cast. For this, I will need to create animations and a fishing line. I started by having the player turn based on where the player is clicking. I also made the fishing rod do a little flick. Now that you can cast your rod, how the hell am I supposed to make a fishing line? I tried and failed to create one in Unity, but maybe Godot will be different. I guess it's time to do some research. I created an object called fishing line and overrode its draw function. Creating a straight line is easy, but I want it to look like a real fishing line. I made a function that takes a list of points that creates a curve between them. Using this function, I added each point the bobber passes through to the list. This created a curve, but not what I was looking for. I inverted the points, but that looks even worse. My new plan is to reflect our current curve over the line that is formed between the end of the fishing rod and the bobber. I found a Stack Overflow question from, you'll never guess, 12 years ago. It perfectly explained how to do the reflection in code. It works, but it still looks horrible. So I tried tweaking some of the numbers, but I couldn't get it to work. There's only one more solution that I can think of. I went back to the drawing board and created something that I think mimics the shape of a fishing line pretty well. I do some math to find a function for a parabola that goes through the needed points and then add the results of the function to the points list. This creates a dip effect in the line that makes it look like, well, you know, a fishing line. This line looks great when casting below the player, but is inverted when above the player. I brought back the magic reflection line and used the formula from before to invert the points along the line when above the player. Now it works in all directions. Yes, creating a fishing line took the entire day. But now it's day 3. Let's create some art. I made some tiles and started placing them in a map. Godot tile maps are awesome. You're able to create multiple layers in one tile map that gives you so many options for making a scene. After making a simple scene, I decided to add some more touches to the cast. I made an icon to show where the player is aiming and added an X when the player is trying to cast too far away. I then reused my cast function, but in reverse, to allow the player to right click to pull back the bobber. To make the cast important, I decided to add a bit of spice to it. Now when the player clicks, a bar pops up. The player must let go when the bar is full in order to have an accurate throw. A random distance away from your click is calculated based on how close to accurate your throw was. This function makes sure your throw does not go any further than the length of your fishing line. When you fish on the beach, it is a common practice to slowly reel in the line to attract fish that see the bait. The movement gets the fish's attention or something. I don't know, I'm not a scientist. But anyways, I made it so the player can hold left click to begin reeling in the bait. This will be an important part to catching a fish. I didn't do anything on day 4. Can we get a like and subscribe for all the progress made today? I think it's about time we get a fish in this fishing game. I want to make the fish similar to the fish in Animal Crossing. I want the player to be able to see shadows of the fish so they know where to cast. I'm just going to use some placeholder art for now, so instead of an orange fish, there will be a shadow in the future. The fish is spawned inside of an area 2D. The fish randomly picks a location in this area, then swims to it. After reaching its target location, it picks another random target. This simulates a fish swimming in the water randomly pretty well. I then made it so when the fish sees the bobber nearby, it will swim towards it. The player must then reel in the rod a little bit to keep the fish's attention. After a set length of time, the fish falls for the bait and bites the hook. When the fish bites the hook, the most important part of the fishing experience starts, the minigame. This part is extremely important, and I think I have a great idea. Generally, fish don't enjoy being stabbed in the mouth, so it attempts to swim away. Each fish will have a set pattern of trying to swim away and resting. The player can reel in the fish while it is resting, but while the fish is swimming away, shown by the shake effect, the player is unable to reel it in, and if they try to do so, they will increase the tension in the fishing line until it breaks. We now need to decide how this minigame is going to function lengthwise. We have two options: pull until the fish reaches the land, or have a set amount of time the player needs to pull before getting to land. I chose the first option. My goal from the start was to create a realistic feeling fishing system, and this system makes the most sense. Of course, fish that are deeper in the water would require you to reel in for longer. This will also allow me to adjust the difficulty in a unique way by changing the location of the fish, which will be different depending on the type of fish. After figuring out the system that I wanted to use, I created a sprite for the first fish. It starts as a shadow while in the water, but changes into its actual texture when the player reels it in. I created a pop-up for when the player catches a fish. It displays the name and size of the fish. This size is based on a cool bell curve function that I used in my previous video. I spent multiple hours trying to set up the text. I wanted the text to be a different resolution than the rest of the game, so that I could use any font and still have it look good. After failing many times over again, I just decided to use a free pixel art font that I found online. I quickly added a bar next to the player to display the tension of the fishing line. I chose red for the color after trying to make it a gradient. I wanted the color of the bar to start out as blue and become more red the fuller the bar. Again, I failed trying to do this. I also made the fishing line red when pulling at the wrong time. I finally added animations and the fishing mechanic was starting to feel complete. Day 7 started with some more art. I created some new tiles and I made a map for the game. I created a simple spawner for the fish. There are a few bugs, my favorite being the ability to catch multiple fish at the same time. I then added some more spawners around the island. I finished the day by creating more sprites for some new fish.
When you arrived, you came alongside to take me away.
Day 8, the final day of the game jam. Let's lay down the schedule for the day. At 2 p.m, I got an essay due. At 4 p.m, I got a test. And at 7 p.m, the game is due. So, shouldn't be too hard, right? I quickly created a total of 5 fish: the striped mullet, southern flounder, Spanish mackerel, pinfish, and menhaden. All fish that I have caught in my lifetime, so it felt appropriate. Each region has different spawn rates for the fish. The east side has easy fish like the pinfish and the mullet, while the west side has lots of mackerel. Well, that's not supposed to happen. I finished my essay with an hour to spare. I learned what intermediate microeconomics was to pretend like I knew enough to take a test, and got home with 2 more hours left. I speedran adding all the sound effects I could think of, and submitted the game with 34 minutes and 2 seconds to spare. You can playtest what I submitted with the link in the description and comment what you think I could do better. I had a few issues with Godot in the making of this game, but there were also parts where I knew I would have had issues if I was using Unity, but didn't with Godot. I'm sure there are solutions to my problems as well, all of which I will figure out soon enough. The task list for Emerald Isle keeps growing, and my goal of making a complete game is still gaining strength. Make sure to like and subscribe so you can see my future videos about an inventory system, character customization, boss fights, NPC conversations, quests, day and night cycles, calendar system, a better ocean, and more.